Yo, what's up guys? My name's Ashley Jackson and welcome to an episode of Behind the Brand.
By my face, hey, don't got time to waste, I don't need permission, I'ma do it all today, They just can't believe it, man, that's all they gonna say. See these places on Spotify, that's money in the bank about my face. Hey, don't got time to waste, I don't need permission, I'ma do it all today, They just can't believe it, man, that's all they gonna say. See these plays up on my Spotify, that's money in the bank by my face.
If you don't know who I am, I'm a photographer from the Gold Coast. You can follow me right here on Instagram at AshTJackson for all of my photography work. I also run a small clothing company called Hidden Visions Co., which you can follow right here on Instagram. So today, I wanted to give you guys a video, a little bit of insight as to my 4 things you should know before starting a clothing line. So the first thing you need to understand about starting a clothing line is that you need to develop a good idea, a theme, and a message. Now that first good idea obviously is starting the clothing brand, but coming up with a name, because a name is what attracts people straight off the bat without seeing your product. Now that name has to have some sort of theme, message, or story behind it as to why people want to feel affiliated with that brand. So the more you focus on that, the more you have a better understanding before you even get to the product stage, is understanding what you're trying to portray to your customers. Now remember, branding is everything. So your name has to look as good as it sounds. So sometimes it's worthwhile coming up with a name, putting it in Photoshop or even in a Word document and just seeing how it looks with different fonts and whether it looks appealing or not. That's the sort of thing that a lot of people don't realize until they get to a point where they print a shirt or do something on a product and they don't realize, and they go, oh, it doesn't look as good as I thought it was. So that's understanding your theme and your story and your message will also help you figure out what type of designs, where you want to be in your market, what type of market you want to be in, and who you want to target. Now remember, branding is everything. With that sort of branding, wherever you start, it's going to be ever evolving. So it will evolve from that first initial start, but it will get better and more refined as you go along. Alright, so the second thing you should know before starting a clothing company, now that you've decided on what your theme and your idea and your story is, that'll help determine what type of direction you want to go in with your branding, your design work, and even what type of products you want to use or develop. Now there's a couple of things. So you might come up with a design that's super cool and you may be just too much to go to a local screen printer, and you might have to go and develop that somewhere where you do cut and sew. So you need to have an idea of where you want to start and where you want to finish in terms of what you want to deliver. So for instance, most people get into the idea of developing, they've got something cool like a logo or a design or a graphic print. So you just go to your local screen printer, you get them to do it, and boom, you've got t-shirts. Now there's lots of brands that let you do that sort of thing. So that's, you know, your brands like Gildan, Anvil, AS Color, and they provide you a list of products that you can basically put your designs, logos, whatever you want on them, and then sell them. Or you can go down the route that I chose, which was to go cut and sew, and that's develop the product from start to finish. Now that's understanding that, picking what type of materials, designing the size chart, so how big the sleeves are, how long the shirt is, how big the neck is, all of those little bits and pieces. This will help you decide what type of price range you want to be in, so whether that's a high-end product, a low-end product, a mid-range product, and where you want to be in that sort of market. So all of these things play a part into figuring out where you want to be with your brand before you even develop a product to put out there to sell. So the third thing you want to know before starting a clothing company is it is going to involve a lot of work. That means putting in the time. Just like anything, for it to be successful, you got to put hours in. So the same thing applies to starting a clothing company. Not everything is going to be an instant success. Not everything is going to happen straight away. And sometimes these things require you to have patience. So understanding there is just more to having a design on a t-shirt when it comes to a clothing line. Now you have to understand and know what you can do for your business. So that's design, photography, marketing, understanding the books and where the money goes in these sorts of instances. Now, the time you spend on this will equal your output. So if you only put a half hour into your brand every week, you're only going to get as much as you put in. So you have to make it a priority. You have to make it something that you live and breathe. So sometimes that involves knowing what you can and can't do, whether you have to outsource. So for me, I have limited graphic design skills. So sometimes if it's outside of my wheelhouse, I outsource it. I find a designer that I really like, whether it's someone I've worked with before, or I find someone whose art I am extremely interested in, and put together my ideas and put it forward to them and see if they can develop it. That also comes down to research. Now, research is key in clothing or in any business. That's knowing what type of product you want to put out, what type of market you want to reach, what type of customer do you have. In the idea of a clothing company, going back to your previous point of where you want to be, knowing whether you want to be custom cut and sew, whether you want to have products that are just simply screen printed t-shirts, what type of products you want to have, whether that's hats, or whether you want to use a company that provides all of these products for you and you just put your name and your logo on it. This comes to the next point of make sure you sample. Just like everything, measure twice. Most of your customers will have no idea who your brand is or what your brand is or what it's about. So when they do take the leap of faith and purchase your product, you want to make sure that it is a quality product, or they understand what they're getting. So if they are getting a screen printed t-shirt that you bought from Gildan, they should know that. If you're producing product that you've spent the time picking out the cottons and figuring out the length and designing it for a certain style or a way, they should know that. I'm a firm believer of quality over quantity. When you get into maybe sort of fast fashion and hitting things like on trend, and quantity probably is required if you're turning over that sort of product. So remember, all of that research will lead you to having a better product and a better understanding, which will then lead to having a smoother operation in the future. The sample process is super important. It's super expensive. It's where you'll dump a lot of money into it, and it will take time. I can't stress enough that you just require to be patient with it. These things take time to develop good products. Now, in saying that, doing all of this, I always say, make sure you take your time with it, but I also say, make a start. Because if you don't start, some people just won't do it. And in fairness, if you find it overwhelming, then it's probably not for you. And that's not to bite on anyone. I'm always about people pushing for what they want to do. But it takes a lot of time, it takes a lot of effort, it takes a lot of work to make sure that this type of product or that your business is going to work. So the fourth thing you want to know before starting a clothing company is just basically not being cheap. And I'm not referring to just being financially cheap. I'm referring to, don't be cheap with your time. If you only spend, or you only have the time to spend 30 minutes a week on something, that's all you're really going to get out from it. You're not going to turn something that you spend so little time on into something massive that can produce for you. On top of that, also, if you only invest so much money, you can only expect so much return. Now, when I'm talking about being cheap in terms of financially, I am the type of person who's always looking for the best deal possible to get the product that I want without sacrificing the type of product I can output. So for me, a lot of sampling for products like cut and sew take time, and they will take a fair amount of money. It costs me a lot of money to make sure I get the products that I want. So that comes with a cut and sew process, but I'm more than happy to do it to produce the best possible product. Also, you have to remember the type of costs that come along when you're starting to put all this together. That's your marketing costs, your product costs, where are you keeping your products, how are you shipping these products. Now, sometimes you'll be able to lower these costs by doing them yourselves, but you have to understand that sometimes it's better to outsource some of those things. So whether that's doing photo work, doing design work, or what type of screen printers. So don't cheap out on that sort of stuff. Make sure you hire the right type of photographer for you. Make sure if you're going to hire a designer, make sure you really like their work and you understand what you're trying to get across, which comes back to our first point, is understanding what your brand wants to do and what type of story you want to tell. Because if you don't know that and you put out a story that even you're not convinced with, how is your customer supposed to understand what you're doing or feel any sort of affiliation to your brand? The other thing on like where I probably would say not to cut corners on is like what type of screen printer you use, what type of garments you're using, that sort of stuff people remember. So for instance, I would never buy Kanye West merch from his Life of Pablo, even though I really enjoyed everything that he did with that, because I knew it was on a Gildan tee and I didn't think it was worth the money that it was put into. And I'm happy to put money into a shirt, so whether it be like, you know, high-end product or low-end product, I know I deem what sort of value I'm trying to get back from that. Don't be cheap in terms of the time and effort that you put into your brand. So make sure that the people you hire or the people that you invest your time and money into, make sure they align with the goals that you want to achieve, or have a really clear understanding of what your story and what your brand is. Now, of course, these are only my 4 tips of what I've learned from dealing with my brand over the last few years and trying to get a feel of what we're doing and trying to grow as a brand. So they may or may not work for you. These are sort of things that I've picked up from the brands that I've worked with as a photographer, as well as dealing with it in my brand in terms of what I do on a day-to-day basis. Hopefully you find this helpful. I'm going to try and keep putting videos like this out, and hopefully you can join along with what we're trying to do. And if you like what you see, you can check out my brand at our website. Link is in the bio. Tell us what you think, leave some comments, and we'll be talking to you guys soon.
I don't need permission, I'ma do it all today. They just can't believe it, man, that's all they gonna say. See these places.